I would like to welcome your wife, Marsha, who is with us today. Welcome, Marsha. I'd also like to acknowledge your son, Russell, and daughter, Brianna, who I'm sure are proudly watching. We are grateful for their continued support of your service. U.S. Strategic Command, or STRATCOM, is the principal command for ensuring our nation's nuclear deterrent is effective, safe, and reliable. Today, our nuclear deterrent consists of a triad of ballistic missile submarines, heavy bombers, and land-based intercontinental missiles. This triad is the bedrock not only of our national defense, but also the security of our allies and partners who depend on the U.S. nuclear umbrella. Integral to the triad is a highly secure and multi-layered nuclear command, control, and communications, or NC3 system, which connects the President to the nuclear forces. Successfully maintaining this nuclear deterrent is a mission fundamental to our long-term strategic competition with China and Russia. This mission has made especially clear throughout Russia's assault on Ukraine. Russia has conducted out-of-cycle nuclear exercises, issued inflammatory statements about tactical nuclear strikes in Ukraine, and continues to threaten nuclear power plants in the region. Vladimir Putin's behavior has been reckless to a dangerous degree. China has also made significant changes to its nuclear approach. Not constrained by the New START Treaty, Beijing has built hundreds of new ballistic missiles and intends to have a stockpile of more than 1,000 warheads by the early 2030s. In the past 2 years, we have also seen China develop missile fields in hardened silos throughout the country. This development, along with China's development of air-delivered weapons and ballistic missile submarines in the South China Sea, fundamentally changes the nature of Beijing's nuclear doctrine. We need to seriously consider that we are entering a new trilateral nuclear competition era. The Cold War was essentially a bilateral rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union, and deterrence theory and communication methods were developed based on two competitors. Those rules now must change with the ascendancy of China and its growing nuclear arsenal. And General Cotton, I'd like to know how you would address this new deterrence dynamic involving not one, but two near-peer competitors. If confirmed, you will be responsible for not only the health of our triad and the NC3 system, but the 150,000 military personnel who operate them. STRATCOM's uniformed and civilian workforce is known to have the highest levels of personal reliability and professionalism. It will be your responsibility to support them and their families and ensure our nuclear deterrent can operate effectively around the clock. Supporting your command is the National Nuclear Security Administration, or NNSA, which maintains and develops our nuclear warheads. The organization has over 40,000 technicians, engineers, and scientists working at 3 design laboratories, 1 test site, and 4 production plants. NNSA will need your support as it experiences its highest workload since the 1980s in managing 5 major warhead programs while rebuilding nuclear infrastructure. Finally, the 2022 Nuclear Posture Review has validated the importance of modernizing the Triad, the NC3 system, and the supporting infrastructure at NNSA. This is the 3rd historic cycle of modernization since the 1960s. You will be responsible for ensuring the United States can deliver the capabilities needed to effectively deter our adversaries through 2070. General, you will be undertaking enormous responsibilities if confirmed. As I said earlier, the United States nuclear deterrent is the bedrock of our national defense. Some have said that this deterrent is never used, but that is a misconception. It is used 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. You will be responsible for continuing to ensure that the United States and its allies can deter not 1, but 2 near-peer nuclear adversaries, something your predecessors did not face. I look forward to hearing how you would prioritize and meet each of these critical responsibilities. Thank you again for your willingness to serve our nation, and I look forward to your testimony. Now let me recognize Ranking Member Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also want to welcome General Cotton, thank him for his long service. General Cotton, your predecessor, appeared before this committee several times over the past few years, warning of the growing strategic threats that we face as a nation. I think we all understand that. China's massive military investments are shifting from the balance of power in the Pacific, even as it builds the capacity to extend its reach across the globe. Putin's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine and his reckless threats of nuclear escalation remind us of some of the worst days of the Cold War. We effectively resisting China's and Russia's aggression requires that we remain resolute and deal with the world as it is, not as we would prefer it to be, which is sometimes a mistake. I was pleased that the administration's nuclear posture review declined to reverse many policy options that would have severely damaged our nation's deterrent. However, the administration's decision to discard planned enhancements to our forces, even as China and Russia grow their arsenals, was disappointing to say the least. Your predecessor, along with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and other senior officers, voiced their objection to these decisions, and on a bipartisan basis, we have taken steps to reverse those faulty choices. Moving forward, we need to accelerate the work of the right size of our forces to meet strategic deterrence requirements of the coming decades. I trust you will be an advocate for such efforts as the next Strat Commander. Look forward to your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. General Cotton, you're recognized for your opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and distinguished members of the committee. It's truly an honor to appear before you today as a nominee to be the next commander of U.S. Strategic Command. I am very grateful to the President, Secretary of Defense, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for their trust and confidence in me for this nomination. I would like to recognize the current commander of U.S. Strategic Command, Admiral Chaz Richard, and his wife, Lisa, for their 40 years of selfless service to this great nation. Joining me today is my wife, Marcia. She has been my best friend and biggest champion for over 33 years. A former collegiate athlete and school teacher, Marcia has been a remarkable advocate for the men and women and their families. She is an incredible source of strength and inspiration for me and my family. Not with us today, but always in our hearts, is our son, Russell, an Intel analyst, and our daughter, Brianna, a recent University of Michigan Law School graduate. I'm so proud of my children for the path that they have taken to serve our nation in their own unique ways. There are two people who are no longer with us, but whose absence I feel more strongly on days like today. That's my mother, Amy, and my father, James. My father joined the Army Air Corps in 1942 and fought in the Pacific Theater before the establishment of the United States Air Force and served in both the Korean and Vietnam Wars prior to retiring as a United States Air Force Chief Master Sergeant in 1974. My mother, all 5 feet 2 inches of her, was fierce, full of compassion, and kept her boys, the chief and I, in line. My parents are the foundation of who I am, and I know they're looking down upon Team Cotton with great pride. Lastly, I want to thank the men and women of Air Force Global Strike Command and U.S. Strategic Command for their continued professionalism and dedication. Their dedication to this mission is essential in a world where we now face 2 near-peer competitors. We must deter the pacing challenge of China and address the acute threats presented by Russia. It is both our conventional and nuclear capabilities, along with the crucial support from our allies and partners, that underpins our strategic deterrence. Our nation's nuclear forces continue to be safe, secure, reliable, and effective. As we bring the B-21 Raider, the Columbia-class ballistic missile submarine, Sentinel Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Weapon System, and Long-Range Standoff Weapon Online, we will continue to ensure the credibility of deterrence for decades to come. Underpinning all of this is our nuclear command, control, and communication systems known as NC3. While the current system is secure and resilient, modernization and sustainment of this capability is just as important as the weapon system platforms themselves. If confirmed, I will use my authorities to ensure that NC3 systems continue to outpace the threat. We'll always build in margin, we'll always have hedge. The mission of U.S. Strategic Command is to deter our adversaries and employ force to guarantee the security of our nation and our allies. If confirmed, I will work with relevant agencies across the U.S. government and within DOD, collaborate closely with civilian leaders and directly with my fellow combatant commanders as we monitor the global threats and execute operations in accordance with the National Defense Strategy. I commit to commanding a resilient joint force capable of conducting multi-domain operations focused on deterring aggression and, if necessary, defending this nation. I look forward to working with Congress and the members of this committee to address the strategic challenges of this great nation. Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, distinguished members of this committee, it is an honor to sit before you today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, General. I have a series of questions that are standard for nominees. You may respond appropriately. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
Yes.
Have you assumed any duties or taken any actions that would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
No.
Exercising our legislative and oversight responsibilities makes it important that this committee, its subcommittees, and other appropriate committees of Congress receive testimony, briefings, reports, records, and other information from the executive branch on a timely basis. Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify before this committee when requested?
Chairman, I do.
Do you agree, when asked before this committee, to give your personal views, even if your views differ from the administration?
Chairman, I do.
Do you agree to provide records, documents, and electronic communications in a timely manner when requested by this committee, its subcommittees, or other appropriate committees of Congress, and to consult with the requester regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such records?
I do.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with deadlines established by this committee for the production of reports, records, and other information, including timely responding to hearing questions for the record?
I will.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
I will.
Will those witnesses and briefers be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefing?
They will be.
Thank you, General. General, the 2018 Nuclear Posture Review recommended a supplemental nuclear system to the Triad, a submarine-launched cruise missile, or SLCN. The 2022 NPR did not pursue it. And what are your views on the nuclear submarine-launched missile?
Chairman, thank you for the question. If confirmed, my job is to be able to present the decision maker, the President of the United States, with a wide variety of options to be able to meet challenges that we have seen to be warranted due to a requirement. In this case, I would want to be able to present the maximum capabilities that are available. When it comes to SLCN, I must admit that I would like to be able to do like my predecessors before, to make an assessment on that. If it is able to meet that capability gap that is there, I'd like to be able to see that and assess that so I can make my best military assessment on the specific weapon system itself, because I am not familiar with that weapon system on the specifics of what it can do with the capabilities to close the capability gap that we might perceive.
General, as I noted in my opening statement, we're now facing a three-way nuclear race which alters some of the traditional notions of deterrence based on the bipolar world of the Cold War. If confirmed, do you believe that you will have the sufficient forces and capability to undertake this new and evolving mission?
Chairman, thanks for the question. I'd like to answer that in two ways. The current force that we have today, we're ready to execute today. What I would say is, if confirmed, and I know this is continually happening today, is we must evaluate what the additional risks are and what the adversary is doing to ensure two things. First, to evaluate to make sure that the nuclear strategy that we have within Strategic Command can meet the objectives, the national objectives that are presented before us. So the first thing I would do, if confirmed, is to ensure, because, sir, the first time since 1945, the first time for us as a nation, we have two near-peer adversaries. We have always put together a nuclear defense strategy that has one nuclear peer. We were going to have to roll up our sleeves to ensure that we're doing everything that we can strategy-wise within Strategic Air Command, between STRATCOM, to ensure that we're meeting the objectives to be able to have and take care of two near peers. First time in history that we've ever seen that.
Thank you, sir. STRATCOM is the Joint Staff Lead for ensuring the Joint Force can successfully defend and prosecute electronic warfare, which is now referred to as Electromagnetic Spectrum Operations, or EMSO. Russia has successfully used EMSO in Ukraine, and China has greatly expanded their capabilities. Can you tell us your views on this subject, and if confirmed, will you ensure it receives your full attention?
Thank you, Chairman. Absolutely. So, if confirmed, it is going to be a front burner item within STRATCOM. You know, I know right now that the Executive DoD EMS Superiority Strategic Implementation Plan has been laid out, in which the commander of STRATCOM is going to be the lead, and that the direct report to the commander of STRATCOM. That is something that, if confirmed, I want to be able to dive down and do a true assessment of what's going on with EMS. I agree. It has atrophied over the decades, and now with two near peers, we're going to have to understand how to attack that and how to attack it well. So it is absolutely something that I would look into, sir.
Thank you very much. Senator Inhofe, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have three questions, and while you have addressed all three of these, I'll give you a chance to elaborate a little bit more if that's your desire. General Cotton, we all know how critical it is that we build our nation's nuclear deterrent, but we're still years away from fielding any new systems. So in terms of your priorities, how important is it that we accelerate as much of the U.S. nuclear modernization plan as soon as possible?
Senator, thank you for the question. I think about it this way. So if confirmed, I think the challenge of Strategic Command is to ensure that we sustain legacy system as we transition to the our modernized systems. That's going to be key for us. In order to do that, it's going to take the full power of government to be able to pull that together, especially when we're talking about the Sentinel weapon system and the Columbia and all of the 5 that I have under my purview as a current Joint Forces Air Component Commander. working for the commander of STRATCOM. So being able to do that, sir, I think a couple of key things are going to be required from us. We're going to need stable, predictable, and adequate and timely funding. My job, if confirmed as the commander of STRATCOM, is to ensure that we also have stable requirements. Because what we're going to see, and what I think is going to be great for us with the new modernized systems, is the fact that we're by design building in a system that we know will last for decades, because that's built into the system. Okay. So the modularity that we will see will be able to keep pace with the threats that we will see in the future. What we need to do in the meantime, though, is to sustain the legacy system that is still safe, secure, and effective as we make that transition.
Okay, that's good, and I appreciate that very much. It's already been mentioned a couple of times, talking about the two peer adversaries. This is something that we have not done before. This is new, and even though you did already address this, you've been asked this question even by the chairman, I'd like to give you the opportunity to expand, if you want to, on how we're going to handle this. What's going to be different about two adversaries?
Thank you, Senator. What's different is two near peers that actually act differently from a doctrine's perspective. We understand Russian nuclear theory and nuclear doctrine. Minimal deterrence was what we thought of when we talked of China as recent as 2018. We have seen the incredible expansiveness of what they're doing with their nuclear force, which does not, in my opinion, reflect minimal deterrence. They have a bona fide triad now. So we're going to have to understand more deeply the Chinese nuclear strategy.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. Now, while the chairman did talk about this before, I want to frame the question as my last question a little bit differently, General Cotton. A number of the senior military officers have testified to their support of continuing the sea-launched cruise missile program, including the chairman and the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the chief of naval operations, and the commanders of the U.S. Strategic and European Command. Do you agree with do you agree with these leaders right now and your colleagues that we should keep this program going? And I'd like to have you be as specific as possible, because we all know what the program is. We've all expressed ourselves on it. So I'd like to have your thoughts on this.
Yes, Senator. So the chairman, the vice chairman, and the current commander of U.S. Strategic Command absolutely understand where they are on the endorsement of continuing.
That's correct.
From my perspective, I absolutely understand that they're looking at the capability gap to be able to do that. The only thing that's different between they and I is I have yet to do an assessment on the weapon system itself. But absolutely understand where they are on being able to have a capability gap that is filled that they have seen. I have seen that capability gap as well, and I endorse the fact that we need to fill that capability gap.
Thank you, General.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. Senator Shaheen, please.
Good morning. Congratulations, General Cotton, on your nomination. Thank you to you and your family for your long service. I would like to begin by following up a little bit on Senator Inhofe's questions about the challenges with modernization. And you talked about a dependable budget process. You talked about a whole-of-government cooperative effort. What you didn't talk about is the supply chain and the challenges with making sure we have the critical minerals, the other requirements to modernize our nuclear arsenal. Can you talk a little bit about what you think those challenges are and how you see the ability to impact that and what we should be thinking about as a committee?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Absolutely correct. As we are seeing the modernization programs within the nuclear portfolio, I would venture to say that it's probably being seen across the Department of Defense, but in particular for the nuclear portfolio, even as we're seeing the industry partners do Herculean efforts and work in moving the programs along at a great pace, what we are now finding is the realities of supply chain limitations and supply chain shortfalls. We had a great discussion, and a good example are some components that are U.S.-made components with U.S.-made subcomponents that are still taking what would be on average maybe 10 days to source, that are now taking up to 90 days to source. So by definition, if you look at what we need to do in regards to maintaining a flow and schedule to get our new modernized systems online, if you introduce that into the flow, those delays right there are going to cause me concern. And I think it's going to take everyone to understand how we can close the gap on supply chain management and ensure that we can get the supplies to the industry partners that are trying to modernize this force.
And are you comfortable that we have the components that we're going to need being manufactured within the United States, the materials that we need being produced in the United States?
Ma'am, I did until we started to see that kind of eke into the schedule as being problems with supply chain.
Thank you. Can you describe how you analyze the difference between strategic deterrence and integrated deterrence, and how you see that affecting your role, if at all, in terms of the mission of STRATCOM?
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for the question. It's integral. Integrated deterrence is a whole of government opportunity. And the way I describe that is, I remember growing up and using the dime theory when I was a young lieutenant, but it's using all instruments of power within the government, the United States, to afford us a deterrence factor that makes it so we never have to get to the day where I have to execute the mission if confirmed from U.S. Strategic Command. Strategic deterrence, to me, composes more than just nuclear deterrence. Strategic deterrence, to me, has a conventional and a nuclear component to it. And it is the backstop, in my opinion, to ensure that we can deter forces when called upon.
So does the focus on integrated deterrence change the role that you would have confirmed as the head of STRATCOM?
Ma'am, I don't believe so, because I think strategic deterrence is an integral part of the overarching integrated deterrence that we all speak of.
Thank you. One of the, as someone who remembers the Cold War very vividly and the focus on the concern about nuclear annihilation and the ability to destroy the world that way, and there was a lot of attention to that has dissipated over the years with some of the arms control agreements and all. But I think as we look at the war in Ukraine and some of Vladimir Putin's statements, there is a renewed concern about what the use of nuclear weapons would mean. Are there ways in which you think our strategic command, our nuclear Triad, are helping to constrain what Vladimir Putin does now in this war in Ukraine?
Senator, thank you for the question. I absolutely believe that our nuclear deterrent force held. We did not see Russia do anything with our native or our NATO partners. The rhetoric we may have heard the rhetoric, but I think at the end of the day, Russia and China both understand that we have a strong, resilient nuclear force that is offering deterrence to ourselves and extended deterrence to our allies.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sheen. Senator Fisher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General, for being here today, and thank you for your willingness to continue your service to this country. I'd like to welcome your family as well. Madam, it's nice to see you here, and I know the sacrifices that you and your family make on behalf of this country as well. Thank you. General Cotton, a lot of times in this committee and on the subcommittee of strategic forces, our main focus is on modernization of our triad. We also try to gain a fuller understanding of the future needs that our military must have to provide for national security. And we talk about things like SLCM and the need that commanders such as yourself will have to provide options to the president when or if you are ever in that position. The more options you can present, the better for the security of this country, the better for the people of this country. But also under the duties and responsibilities of the STRATCOM combatant commander, we need to look at the importance of NC3. We have to look at the NNSA's supporting infrastructure as well. So, General, I think that when we talk about nuclear modernization, and we have that focus on the triad, on the weapons systems, the warheads, we shouldn't forget, we should not forget about NC3, the architecture, as well as the scientific and production infrastructure of NNSA. Can you talk about how important these elements are to the deterrent and the modernization challenge that we're seeing in these areas as well?
Senator, I'd love to. You know, I'll start with NC3. I know there's members of the committee that says it's the fourth of the triad, right? It's the quad. I've heard folks say that. I call it the tapestry. In my opening statement, you heard me discuss and talk about it is just as important as the platforms that we're talking about modernizing, and that is absolutely true. The good news is it is still it's a resilient system today. What I like having over 36 years in this business is the conversations that people like yourself and others also see it as just as important as the weapon systems that we often talk about. If confirmed, I'd use my authorities. As everyone is aware, the NEC or the NC3 Enterprise Center that is located within Strategic Command and the Commander Strategic Command having kind of oversight, delegated oversight authorities to be able to kind of make sure that we as a department are looking to ensure that we are modernizing with next-gen technologies. I call it NC2 over assured comms to ensure that we have the state-of-the-art NC3 systems that we need for not only today, not only midterm, but the future. And that is going to be absolutely critical for us because I guarantee you that I want to ensure that we always outpace our adversaries who are also paying attention to our NC3 systems.
STRATCOM also has significant responsibilities for the electromagnetic spectrum operations. Can you describe some of the challenges in this mission area and what STRATCOM is doing to help rebuild the force structure and the capabilities that we need?
Yes, ma'am. So from my vantage point as a Joint Forces Air Component Commander, I can only give my vantage of what I have on the Air Force side of the house. If confirmed, I would like to make an assessment on the entire portfolio. But from our vantage point, I think we're a little behind. And I don't think I know we're behind, but the good news is I know that we're working to try to close the gap on us not paying attention to EMS for decades. So if confirmed, that would be one of the things that would be on the plate that I would absolutely want to assess and be the greatest advocate that I could be as the commander of STRATCOM in ensuring that we have not pace our adversaries, but lead our adversaries in that domain.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask you about also as critics portray our nuclear deterrence as a relic of the Cold War, but I will send that to you in a written question. Thank you.
ma'am.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Hirono, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, General Cotton and Mrs. Cotton. As part of my responsibilities on this committee to ensure the fitness of nominees for appointment to senior positions within the administration, I ask the following two initial questions of all nominees to all of the committees on which I serve. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
Senator, no.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No, ma'am.
General, you've been asked a number of questions about SLCM N, and while some military leaders, including Chairman Milley, have expressed their support for SLCM M, several DoD officials, including Secretary Austin, have expressed their opposition to the project. I share the concerns expressed by Secretary Austin that the development of such a low-yield or tactical nuclear cruise missile is unnecessary and could lead to a dangerous new nuclear arms race. The United States should be a leader in international efforts to reduce nuclear stockpiles and prevent nuclear proliferation while still ensuring we maintain cutting-edge capabilities to protect our national security. I know that you testified that you will make your own assessment as to SLCM N. I do want to ask you, though, do you agree that the United States has a role to play in preventing a new nuclear arms race? And if so, if confirmed, will you work with the Department of State to support the strengthening of diplomatic efforts to prevent nuclear proliferation?
Senator, thank you for the question. I think that weaves into what we would call integrated deterrence, right? So as we talk about integrated deterrence, I want to take all instruments of power to ensure that we can deter. So in regards to the question that you asked, my best military advice would always be to be able to present the commander-in-chief with a variety of options and capabilities. So that's where I would be if confirmed as a commander of U.S. STRATCOM, is to be able to offer as much capability and options to the commander-in-chief. But I do understand the question that you asked in regard to the Department of State, and the answer is yes. As far as integrated deterrence, I think it's key to that.
Well, I think integrated deterrence means that we have a role to play, I would say a leading role to play in preventing a new nuclear arms race. Would you agree with that?
I do.
So given the importance of non-proliferation, are there other weapons or tactics that can accomplish the same strategic objectives as SLCM N without creating new nuclear weapons?
Ma'am, if confirmed, that is exactly what I meant by making the assessment to understand what would be the gap filler in the capability.
As we prepare to revamp the nuclear triad or modernize the triad, wouldn't our efforts be better utilized focusing on that important mission rather than diverting resources and attention to SLCM N?
Ma'am, I appreciate the committee and what they have done for the overarching modernization of the nuclear portfolio writ large. Once again, I think if confirmed, I still would like to be able to assess and analyze how do you broaden that portfolio to provide more options for the President of the United States.
I think one of the concerns about the Silicon Man is that it's going to be a highly expensive proposition, whereas we are very clear on the need to revamp the Triad and modernize. So going on, the Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine, originally set to be in service for 30 years, will be extended by the Navy out to 42 years. These submarines will begin to retire from the fleet as the Columbia-class comes online to replace them in the late 2020s. The warheads used on the submarines have also undergone life extension programs of their own, in some cases adding an estimate of 30 years to their service life. What concerns do you have with service life extensions as we bridge the gap between aging and new technologies?
Ma'am, thank you for the question. So in regards with our incredible partners in NNSA, who are doing this work for us, I think the question is we need to kind of see what aging you really see from the asset, and also does a life extension solve the problem to get the effects that you want from that asset. So if confirmed, I think that's part of what I would assess as being a member of the Nuclear Weapons Council as well, to be able to get an assessment to see, okay, is it about reuse, or is it about new, and further. So that's something that I would have to make an assessment on if confirmed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cotton, please.
General Cotton, welcome and congratulations on your nominations and continued service. We hear the term arms race a lot, especially in the nuclear context. Last time, I guess we had a major arms race in which we actually contested the race was in the 1980s, and there aren't many senators around who were there then. Pat Leahy and Chuck Grassley, maybe. I bet they took different views on it. I know what view Joe Biden took on it. He continued to criticize Ronald Reagan for an arms race that was going to destabilize the world, lead to a nuclear war. Of course, it led to nothing but victory in the Cold War without even firing a shot. Do we get to decide whether there is an arms race or not, General Cotton, or does the enemy get a vote on that?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Yeah, I would answer it this way, and it still goes back to the options and capabilities that we should be able to provide to the Commander-in-Chief. So from my best military advice is to provide the capability and options for the Commander-in-Chief. And I'd like to be able to provide the most capable options that I can in this regard.
Yeah. And that's why I said the last contested arms race we faced was in the 1980s during the Reagan buildup, because we've been in an arms race with China for the last 30 years. Unfortunately, we haven't been significantly contesting it, and therefore China has been winning it. In the end, whether we enter an arms race is not really up to us. What's up to us is whether we win it or we lose it. And if you ask me, it's much cheaper to win an arms race than it is to lose a war. It goes especially for nuclear weapons. General Cotton, I want to read to you a short excerpt from Winston Churchill's Iron Curtain speech, also known as the Sinews of Strength, a Sinews of Peace speech. Barely 6 months after VJ Day in Fulton, Missouri, Churchill says, "From what I have seen of our Russian friends and allies during the war, I am convinced there is nothing they admire so much as strength, and there is nothing for which they have less respect than for weakness, especially military weakness." Do you agree with Sir Winston that Russians have there's nothing for which they have less respect than weakness, especially military weakness?
Senator, I agree.
Do you think that's true of the Chinese as well?
I do.
Do you think it's true of the Iranians?
I think of all of our adversaries.
Okay, yeah, I thought so too. He continued then to say, "For that reason, the old doctrine of a balance of power is unsound. We cannot afford, if we can help it, to work on narrow margins, offering temptations to a trial of strength." Do you agree with Sir Winston that we should not offer temptations to a trial of strength to our adversaries by operating on narrow margins?
Senator, I think that we always should operate from a power of strength.
And those margins would narrow significantly given China's nuclear buildup if China and Russia became de facto or even de jure allies, correct?
Two near peer allies or adversaries as opposed to one.
Okay. There's been a lot of talk over the last year that a major ground war in Europe between two nation states was unthinkable. Even after Russia invaded Ukraine, such a war was unthinkable. Obviously, Vladimir Putin thought it was quite thinkable. Do you believe that a nuclear war is unthinkable? Not in terms of the consequences it would have for our nation and for the world, but for the fact of whether it might happen. Is a nuclear war unthinkable?
Senator, I think if confirmed, the role that I would play as commander is to make sure that those 150,000 men and women that are supporting Strategic Air Command I keep saying Strategic Air Command, forgive me, Strategic Command are prepared to do what some folks might think is the unthinkable.
I think that's right. You have an unusual and weighty job in that I think it's your responsibility almost every day to think what most people believe is unthinkable and think about what a nuclear war would look like and how it would be fought, and therefore the best way to do what we all want, which is to deter it from happening in the first place. So thank you, General Cotton. Best wishes for you in your new role.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. Senator King, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Cotton, welcome. I'm sure you were briefed before this hearing that the Russians again. Try it again. I'm sure you were briefed that the chairman would ask you a series of routine questions at the beginning, and you went through and answered them properly. I just want to emphasize one of those questions. Do you agree when asked before this committee to give your personal views, even if your views differ from the administration? That's a very important question, because we need to know what your best military advice is, not colored by the views of the administration, the president. I just want to emphasize how important this question is. You answered it properly, but I just want to have it in the back of your head in the future. And it's going to be difficult. It's not easy to say something that may be unacceptable to some other part of the Pentagon or the administration. In looking over my notes as I made questions, I realized that all of my questions involve changes in the strategic posture. You've mentioned several times that we've gone from a bipolar world to a multipolar world in terms of our adversaries. That's a strategic change, but there are others. Just to run down a quick list. Electromagnetic spectrum and electronic warfare, you've touched upon. I realize there's classified information here, but I hope that you will commit to holding serious exercises on electronic warfare and notify us of how we're doing, because this is a new strategic challenge that I'm not sure we're adequately accounted for yet.
So, Senator, for your first question, absolutely yes. My best military advice presented to the committee. For your second is another absolutely yes. We're going to have to flush out through exercises, as you mentioned, to ensure we can find any blind spots and shortfalls and make corrections as warranted and as required. So I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Another area of strategic change has happened in the last 4 or 5 years, and that is hypersonics. We've thought of strategic forces as nuclear weapons and nuclear deterrence. Hypersonics are a new threat that is a strategic threat, particularly, for example, the Chinese putting a a glide vehicle, a hypersonic glide vehicle in orbit, which radically changes things like how much time we might have to react to an attack. Do you view hypersonics as a serious strategic challenge?
Senator, I do, and I see it as a warning challenge. I think as far as when we have a conversation, if confirmed, I think my fellow combatant commanders will have to have a discussion and understand how to give kind of relook missile defense, relook missile warning, understand what a sensor layer looks like that can achieve those effects to give time, because I need to give decision space to the decision maker.
Well, I think it's safe to say that the bullet-on-bullet theory of missile defense is out the window when you're talking about hypersonics. Another area is cyber. You've talked about it. You've indicated how important it is, particularly with NC3. Will you commit to red teaming and pen testing and hackers for hire to test the security of the systems that you're developing? I don't think you really know how secure you are until somebody attacks you. And I want it to be a friendly attack.
Senator, if confirmed, that'll be one of the first directions I would give to the NEC.
Thank you. Final point, again, a new strategic challenge or a different strategic challenge, and I don't expect really an answer, but perhaps you could consider this for the record. That is non-state actors with nuclear weapons. The deterrent theory doesn't work if you don't have a capital city and if you don't care about dying. And we have a proliferation of nuclear weapons, and we have rogue states developing nuclear weapons and nuclear materials. The chances of those materials falling into the hands of a terrorist organization, it seems to me, are increasing gradually but steadily. I hope you will give this some thought, because it's a major strategic challenge that doesn't fit within the ambit of what has been our historic deterrent strategy for dealing with nuclear threats.
Senator, you're absolutely right, and I will get back with you if confirmed, and we can have further discussions along that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Rounds, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, General Cotton, and thank you to you and to your family for your years of service to our country and your continued service in the future. General Cotton, I share the perspective that the nuclear deterrent is the foundation of our national security. In the past, I've asked other leaders in the nuclear enterprise to give their views in plain language on the importance of our nuclear triad, so that our American public, who really don't think about this on a regular basis, can understand why we have hundreds, if not thousands, of nuclear warheads. And can you explain it in such a fashion as to why it is so important to our national security that we not only maintain but accelerate the investment in the modernization of this nuclear triad?
Senator Rounds, thank you for the question. I think if we were to do a perspective on talking about the three legs of the triad in particular, and how it is the backstop and underpins, I think if I was at a town hall meeting, how I would describe that to a local town hall is think about the bedrock of a feature and what holds the rest of your foundation up. You know, when we're building a home, you want to make sure you have a steady property to put the foundation on. For every operational plan that the Department of Defense has, it relies on the fact that strategic deterrence is going to hold to allow those other missions to accomplish. If that does not happen, that's when you see that deterrence fails. The way that we accomplish that is through our triad of having bombers who are recallable if warranted, having submarines that can be used, or having ICBMs that are readily available for the decision maker to do that. Our adversaries understand that and know that we can hold them at bay. That is that bedrock and foundation that is so critically important for us in this nation.
I think it's sometimes we think about the fact that we have great conventional forces, but the reason why those conventional forces can be effective is because everybody knows that in the back, the hammer, are the nuclear forces, which have been upgraded, and that's what I want to talk about next. With regard to our nuclear command and control systems, they've got to be upgraded. We're in the process of doing that now. What do you see as one of the biggest challenges, or what do you see as the biggest challenges regarding the upgrading of our current command and control structure?
Thank you for the question. As I said in my opening comments, my opening statement, I articulated that it's a resilient system today. I think moving forward, I see it as a continuance. You'll never close the book on a modernization of a comm node. So as I see it, I don't know if I see it as a challenge, but what we're going to be able to have to do is, I say, move to a system using 21st century technologies that allows us to have what I called NC3 over assured comms. So being able to make it so we can message and get data to the warfighters in any situation. So I think that challenge is being able to link the legacy systems with the modernized systems. But I'm here to say that I'm quite pleased in the work that's being done with NC3 Next Gen, if you will. So the team is really, really getting after it, and I'm pretty impressed on the way forward on being able to close that challenge.
Thank you, General. And one last item that I wanted to visit with today, and that is, if confirmed, you will be the lead for joint electromagnetic spectrum operations. The growth of 5G technologies continues to add additional requests for larger parts of the band, some of which are needed for national security. Now, recognizing the unclassified setting of this hearing, can you explain to this committee, and perhaps to other folks out there that are wondering why it isn't being made more readily available, but that the Pentagon and the Department of Defense clearly is recognizing the need to protect certain areas of the spectrum for national security purposes. Can you share a little bit about the real necessity of working in a consultative way, really, and in a cooperative way with the FCC and the NTIA in maintaining certain portions of the spectrum for national security purposes, and how absolutely critical it is?
Senator, it is incredibly critical that we maintain and understand, and to be frank, have others understand the necessity to protect certain bands. If confirmed, I would want to collaborate with the FCC and others, so we need to message better. For folks to understand exactly what we're talking about here on the necessity and criticality of making sure that we can protect those bands that you mentioned.
Thank you. Thank you, General. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rounds. Senator Kane, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And General Cotton, great to see you. I enjoyed our visit yesterday. And I think this has been touched on by earlier senators in their questions, but I really was intrigued by the discussion we were having about this multipolar nature of the threat. So as you look at the Triad, we have to always recapitalize and have it be strong. But we have thought of the Triad both in terms of our investment, but even in terms of our theory of deterrence, or our theory about what the Triad means to our defense. We've sort of thought about it as a Triad with respect to one nuclear competitor. Okay, now we have two nuclear competitors, and evidence demonstrates that they're increasingly working together. The U.S. policy for decades kind of said that China and Russia would never get too close because of a history of enmity and different cultures and things like that. but they're getting closer and closer every day, and often they're doing things not only just the two of them, but with Iran, North Korea, sometimes with Turkey. So how should you be confirmed, and I'm confident you will be, how will you approach this analysis of the threat that is not simply an analysis of the capacity of individual adversaries, but the fact that these adversaries are cooperating, and that previous deterrence doctrines were really built more around a bipolar world rather than multiple competitors?
Senator Kane, thank you for the question. You're absolutely right, and we touched upon it earlier. I think what's key, and it's as we discuss, it's multiple approaches too, because one, if confirmed, and I know the work is being currently done within STRATCOM, because as a JFAC commander to STRATCOM, I'm offering input to that today. But if confirmed, that assessment has to continue, because when we talk about, as you said, as we talk about nuclear doctrine is with one near peer adversary. We are, and what that will drive is then that will drive on how do we meet national objectives based on the strategic doctrine within the confines of strategic command. Then we have to then, from my best military advice, understand what force shaping looks like in regards to how do you meet the objectives that would be given to us from the commander-in-chief. That's work that has to be done. And I know it's being done today, but if confirmed, that is one of the first things that we'll dive into, where I can get a better understanding, to your point, of what does it look like when you have two near-peer adversaries that act differently, might work together, might not work together, but we still need to understand, how do you execute against that threat?
Thank you, Joe. Another thing we talked about yesterday was bomber task force missions. There was just a completion of one in Southcom with Panamanian and Ecuadorian partners. We've also done bomber task force missions with European allies. These are to show unity, to test interoperability. Talk about what those missions produce for our defense capacity.
Thank you for that. So Bomber Task Force, our bomber task forces that we currently do on behalf of on behalf of COCOMs, of which I'm the lead as the Air Force Global Strike Commander to present those forces to COCOMs through STRATCOM. It's been incredible, because what it shows why we're the most powerful military on the face of the earth. And that's because we have allies and partners. And what it shows is using conventional forces, what strategic deterrence is all. And there is nothing more gratifying than seeing an ally or a partner come up on a wing of a B-52 that's doing an integrated mission over a COCOM area, and seeing the PA sentiment, if you will, Senator, come back from the adversaries on how that mission went. So it's a win-win for ourselves as well as our allies and partners that participate in those missions that we're doing constantly across the globe.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Senator Ernst, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, General Cotton, for being here today, as well as Marcia. Thank you very much for joining us. And I enjoyed visiting with you in the office. We covered a lot of really great topics important to the defense of our nation. And just a few questions here in this committee. The 2018 National Defense Strategy Commission had determined that the United States might struggle to win, or perhaps even lose, a war with China over Taiwan. This has been a big concern of ours, especially in recent months. Do you agree that the president must have flexible nuclear options to prevent conventional defeat at the hands of our adversaries in this particular scenario?
I do.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And I know that a number of my colleagues have already brought up having a nuclear deterrence, theater nuclear forces in Asia. So I won't go through that again, but I just want to state that I do think it is important that we have those capabilities abroad, especially in that region, considering the scenario that we have seen through the 2018 National Defense Strategy and what we see occurring just in the daily news. So I just want to emphasize my support for making sure that we have the capabilities necessary if we should ever need those present in the Indo-PACOM. Chairman Milley and Vice Chairman Grady also wrote in June that continued modernization and expansion of the ground-based mid-course defense system is critical to defend the homeland from North Korean missiles. Do you agree that we must expand? There's a lot of talk about modernization, but do you agree that we must expand, not merely modernize, homeland missile defense to actually make sure that we're putting in check rogue nations like North Korea?
Senator, thank you for the question. You know, I think when we talk about missile defense, especially with the not only rogue nations, but now with two adversaries, near-peer adversaries that have different capacities and capabilities, I would agree that for the protection of the homeland, more options is better than less.
Yes, more options are better, and I know that we do receive pushback every once in a while on this idea that we need to expand and modernize, and it is extremely costly. And just to emphasize to our fabulous American citizens that Jim Mattis, the way he phrased this in the past is, America can afford survival. I think it's very important that we continue to look at ways that we can expand and modernize. And would you also agree that the capability to destroy hard and deeply buried targets actually enhances our deterrence by denying that our adversary doesn't have sanctuary from U.S. nuclear deterrence?
I would agree.
Yes, and can you think of examples where we might need to look into that further?
Senator, thank you for the question. I think there's opportunities for us to understand what technologies are available that can give us potentially nuclear or conventional that can get after hard and deeply buried targets. Mm-hmm. And if confirmed, I would love to lead the charge and be an advocate in understanding that.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And do you agree that we should sustain the B-83 bomb until we have a suitable replacement?
I think that we need to be able to have an opportunity to provide options, and if that's taken off the table, then we no longer have an option to provide.
Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate that as well. And then, of course, the president extended New START for 5 years when he assumed office. In your opinion, in your best military opinion, are U.S. strategic arms constraints prudent given China's nuclear breakout, which is they are not party to the treaty, and Russia's arsenal of non-strategic nuclear weapons, which are unaccounted for by the treaty?
Senator, I think whatever agreement or treaty that we could do to prevent proliferation is good, with a caveat that it incorporates every aspect of what the signing agreement would be. So what I mean by that are, weapons that are currently not seen as strategic weapons need to be added to that calculus. But any agreement or treaty that would prevent proliferation across the globe, I am for.
Okay, thank you for your answers, and I do appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you in the office the other day, and look forward to hearing more from you. I as well, growing up in Southwest Iowa, I also have been known to call it Strategic Air Command. So, with you, but thank you very much for your time today, General.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Senator Scott, please.
Thank you, Chairman Reed. General Cotton, first, thanks for your service. Congratulations on your nomination. Thank you for your willingness to serve. So here's what informs most of my work here on the committee. First, the United States has several enemies who have no interest other than to harm us. They want us to be weak, independent, and without allies. And you talked about the importance of our allies. Chief among these enemies are China's Communist Party and Vladimir Putin's regime. Second, our enemies wake up every day plotting to harm us. They think about it all the time. Putin's invasion, brutal murdering, raping, and pillaging of Ukraine is, in his own words, his fight against the United States, as though anyone really needed him to hear what he's up to. General Secretary Xi contemplates the same thing for the free and democratic nation of Taiwan. Third, most countries in the world, whether they actually like us or not, they might be jealous of us, they do want America to be powerful and capable of deterring or defeating any aggressor who tries to turn the world into their own dictatorship. Most countries know that there's really only two choices, a world where Communist China, Putin, and the Ayatollah, and maybe others, are making the rules for everyone, or one with a strong and independent United States that faces down aggressors, helps those who help themselves, leads alliances, and promotes state sovereignty and commerce. So if you would agree with that, and I think most of us would agree with those, can you explain why the United States would not want to have the most modern and expansive nuclear and strategic weapons we can have?
Sir, I do agree with that. And to be frank, I am really happy with what this committee has done in regards to where we are on the nuclear modernization front today. You know, are we late to need? Yes. Are we getting after it now? Absolutely. Are we in a position where we can ensure that we have a portfolio that can modularize and meet the needs in the future? I think we do, Senator. But I agree with you. I'm about the strong and not about the weak. So if confirmed, that's my position. I want to be from a position of strength, not from a position of weakness.
So would you agree we ought to accelerate our nuclear modernization plan as much as we can?
Sir, if that's possible, let's do it.
Yeah. After your many years of experience, you know who our enemies are and what they want, what they're capable of doing. You don't live in an ivory tower or an academic bubble where you can tease out theories of disarmament and hope it all sort of goes well. So if you're confirmed, which I believe you will be, and this is not a diplomatic role, right? Your role is not being a diplomat. Your role is to be a fighter.
If confirmed, my role is to be a combatant commander.
Your goal is to scare the living crap out of everybody.
Yes, sir.
Good. Would you agree then the U.S. President should have a variety of strategic weapons and stockpiles so large that no enemy would even think about trying to attack America?
I think we need to have a stockpile that is credible and capable. Absolutely.
And Senator King brought this, King brought this up earlier. I do appreciate the more direct and honest people can be when they're testifying. I know there's probably a lot of pressure to do whatever the administration is, wants you to do, but I do appreciate as much as you can to be direct, because all of us are trying to make the best decisions we can, and you're the expert. So thank you, and thanks for your service. I'm glad you're going to serve. Continue to serve.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Rosen, when you're ready, please.
There it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. appreciate that. Thank you, General Cotton, for testifying today, for your willingness to continue to serve. Really appreciate you. And so, of course, I hail from the great state of Nevada. And I want to talk a little bit about the Nevada National Security Site, the infrastructure upgrades, and how important, of course, it is to our nuclear mission. And I've talked about this a lot in this committee, that the Nevada National Security Site oversees the stockpile stewardship program, principally at our U1A facility, which is, of course, an underground laboratory where scientists conduct those subcritical experiments that verify the safety and reliability of our nuclear stockpile without, and I'm going to repeat this again, without explosive testing. And so U1A is undergoing major construction. That project is soon going to hold the most weapons-capable radiographic system in the world. However, the Nevada National Security Administration currently faces significant infrastructure delays, including at our Nevada National Security Site. So General Cotton is the current commander providing 2 of the 3 legs of the Triad. Can you speak about the importance of the stockpile stewardship program, and if confirmed, how you would plan to working with your fellow Nuclear Weapons Council partners in addressing the NNSA's infrastructure modernization challenges and unfortunate delays?
Senator Rosen, thanks for the question. There is nothing more important than the relationship that we have with DOE and specifically NNSA. As we talked throughout the hearing in regards to the modernization programs, they're interwoven. The platforms mean absolutely nothing if I don't have the assets available for the platforms. So to your question on infrastructure, you're absolutely, not only the Nevada locations, but all of NNSA locations are in dire need of upgrades in their infrastructure that dates back to Manhattan Project times. We're living in a different world today. As I keep saying, 2 near-peer adversaries, nuclear adversaries, we are going to have to ensure that the infrastructure are upgraded and are at the capacity and capability to meet the needs of the warfighter. You mentioned as owning 2 legs, I have modernization programs that are going to need new systems for them. Can't do that without the incredible work of the men and women that make up the NNSA, but they're going to need infrastructure that will allow them to be able to do that type of work.
Yeah, and not just bringing them up to today's standards, but really preparing them for future challenges and innovation that we so desperately are going to need to compete. So thank you for that. Because we do have to think about the technological and advancements. With those advancements also come advancements from our adversaries, so that creates increased threats as well. And so the nuclear command control communication systems of the United States, we know they're connected through a network of communications, different data processing systems. Could possibly lead us vulnerable for cyber attacks. And in fact, in April of 2021, the Department of Energy's Inspector General audit concluded that cybersecurity weaknesses, they really do persist throughout the department's unclassified networks, including those of the National Nuclear Security Administration. So recent news, we've highlighted significant efforts by Huawei to build telecommunication structures right near our ICBM fields that could possibly interrupt our forces or our systems. And can you talk about these potential threats, cyber threats, maybe not directly, but even nearby where some of our critical assets are located?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. So we are really paying attention to what we're seeing as the Chinese are taking advantage of some of the opportunities that they can have in some locations that are near our, in particular, some of our ICBM sites. So we are absolutely looking into that. To your point on cybersecurity, as people talk about NC3, I think your point is well taken. It's also any other support in the architecture of us, the nuclear community, like NNSA, to ensure that they're just as cyber safe as NC2 platform would be. So if confirmed as part of the Nuke Weapons Council as a member, I think that is something that we'll continually have to have more than a discussion about, but figure out how to get to the end state in that regard.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of push points and for handoffs between agencies, information between one another. I look forward to working on that with you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Senator Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General Cotton, good to see you. I enjoyed our discussion the other day. Let me follow up on some of the topics that we talked about. First, if confirmed, you will work closely with the U.S. Space Force, Missile Defense Agency, Northern Command to guarantee the security of our nation. And as you know, Alaska has a lot of critical assets that relate to missile defense. We're the cornerstone of missile defense, over 100 fifth-generation fighters, world-class training ranges. If confirmed, will you commit to visiting Alaska early in your tenure to see these assets meet with the troops that are so critical to our homeland defense that you see in Alaska?
Senator, absolutely.
Thank you. You know, we had a good discussion on basing. In May of 1992, the Strategic Air Command was essentially stood down, and many of our bomber bases around the country, around the world, were closed. We've been talking a lot about great power competition and how we need to be ready to confront two near-peer nuclear-capable adversaries with very large militaries. Given this reality, how should we be approaching the basing of our nuclear-capable bomber fleet, particularly when the B-21 Raider comes online and, again, in line of some of the issues you and I discussed the other day?
Senator, thank you. I think initially when we talk about main operating bases, I'm comfortable where we are. The conversation that we had is how do we disperse forces in the future, especially with two near peers? And our discussion, we talk about the agile combat employment construct that the Air Force with the Chief of Staff, General C.Q. Brown, is leading across the United States Air Force. I say it's a little different, what I call big wing airplanes, as opposed to our fighter forces, but the construct holds and works as well. I would love to be able to make sure that we have opportunities and availability throughout the country to add dilemma to our adversaries, if you will, on where our bomber forces are in the future.
Let me be a little more direct on that. As you know, Alaska is very strategically located, and staging options, rotational deployments, the ability to have not just fifth-gen fighters, but strategic global strike assets based in Alaska that are much closer to Russia, much closer to China. As you and I have discussed, a number of Air Force flag officers have seen this as a strategic concept that we can take advantage of, particularly with regard to great power competition. Do you have any thoughts on that, General, more specifically?
Well, I think the bases in Alaska act as great staging bases for bomber deployments, and I think that's the question that you're asking. The point of having a main operating base, if confirmed, as Commander Stratcom, I'd like to make that assessment to see what recommendations I would make to the service. But today, I think as we move forward, I think having it as a operating staging platform is critical for us. I mean, if you recall, we talked about even ensuring that we have runway lengths, et cetera, moving forward.
Great, and I'm looking forward to working with you, and I look forward to supporting your confirmation. Let me talk about another topic we had the opportunity to discuss, and that's this idea of a strategic breakout as it relates to ICBM capability with regard to China. The current STRATCOM commander, Admiral Richard, called that the recent reports on how quickly China is developing strategic missile capabilities, ICBM capabilities, he called it breathtaking. In your estimation, what is the greatest concern regarding this strategic breakout, and how should we, as a Armed Services Committee, be focused on helping you counter or be ready for that very significant threat?
Thank you for that question. As recent as 2018, we would have described China as having a minimal deterrence, minimal nuclear deterrence. We would have probably had a conversation stating that it was about regional hegemony. Today, they're building ground-based ICBM silos. They have the H-6N, nuclear-capable medium bomber, that has strategic-capable launch platform.
And just real quick, General, not to interrupt, but to give some context, that in April of 2021, commercial satellite imagery revealed 3 new nuclear missile fields in western China, each with approximately 120 missile silos. So this is incredible, is it not, in terms of the size?
It is. It is absolutely incredible, and in such a short time, to Admiral Richard's point.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Senator Kelly, are you ready? Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, great seeing you again this week, and congratulations on your nomination. You know, during our meeting, we briefly discussed your priorities, and if confirmed, for your priorities for modernizing the nuclear triad, the long-range standoff weapon, we talked a little bit about that, or LRSO, represents one leg of the triad and replaces the aging AGM-86B air-launched cruise missile. And the Senate version of the defense bill put almost $1 billion towards continued development of the LRSO. And the LRSO is a unique component of our strategic deterrence in that it is a de-escalatory weapon, in mine and others' opinions. And when our adversaries see, or maybe hear, that our long-range bombers are on high alert, it gives them some pause, and tensions can be cooled without a bomber ever lifting off. So, General, can I get your thoughts on the LRSO, and can I get your commitment, if confirmed, to the continued timely development of this weapon as a vital and de-escalatory component of our nuclear triad?
Senator Kelly, thank you for the question. Bottom line up front, we absolutely need LRSO. The good news is the industry's partner is doing incredible work keeping that program on time and on schedule. And I'm quite pleased as the Air Component Commander, that's the lead MAJCOM, overseeing it now and watching it, seeing what that's doing. So to your point, for our long-range standoff bomber capability, that leg of the triad, having a viable, credible weapon system is absolutely critical. And the LRSO is that viable, critical weapon. That is a de-escalatory weapon, because you're absolutely right. If we're generating bombers, it can send a signal before the first bomber even lifts off.
Any TRL concerns right now? Are there any things you see that you're worried about as we go forward that you could share here?
I have not. I've seen the testing that's underway has been very promising.
Okay. Thank you, General. And also during our conversation on Monday, we briefly talked about the tanker fleet. We have, KC-135s in Phoenix, and so I know this is an issue you're familiar with as the head of the Global Strike Command. And my understanding is, after talking to the team at the 161st Aerial Refueling Wing, which is a National Guard unit, is that unlike the KC-46, the KC-135 is not EMP hardened. I guess they have some kind of makeshift procedures that they could use, but it is clearly not able to handle electronic magnetic pulse that it might be up against, depending on the location and the mission. A small amount of KC-135 sit on a 24-hour-a-day, 7 days a week alert for the strategic defense deterrence mission. How concerned are you about the potential vulnerabilities of this aging tanker?
Sir, thank you for the question. The fleet holds, so I'm confident that it can get us there, but I'm even more confident in what we're seeing in the KC-46 that's being deployed. My fellow MAJCOM commander, General Minahan from Air Mobility Command, I know is on top of the procurement and deliveries of the KC-46. For the KC-135, its delivery, it coexists with the B-52. It was developed to tank the B-52. So it is an aging weapon system. But Senator, it's still meeting the requirements to be able to get our bombers.
As we bring KC-46s online, would you agree that KC-135 squadrons that are participating in the deterrence mission should be given a priority to be replaced with the KC-46?
Sir, if confirmed, what I would like to do is make an assessment to kind of figure out what are the pros and cons of what those mission sets are doing using a legacy system as opposed to using the new modernized system.
Well, thank you, General. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Senator Holy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, good to see you. I appreciated our conversation the other day. Thank you for, I guess it was just yesterday. Thank you for making time for me. Let's follow up, if we could, on a couple of things we talked about. First of all, Admiral Richard, the current STRATCOM commander, of course, has testified, and you and I talked about this some, that the U.S. needs to think very seriously about the requirements for deterring two major nuclear powers at the same time, China and Russia, of course. And you said the same thing yesterday, which I appreciated. Here's my question. If confirmed, would you commit to having STRATCOM do an analysis of the nuclear force requirements to deter both China and Russia now and into the 2030s?
Senator, thank you for the question, and the answer is absolutely yes. I think that's going to be critical for us. I called it earlier, it's the strategic doctrine within STRATCOM, not necessarily policy. I'm talking about the strategic doctrine within STRATCOM to ensure that we can do exactly what you asked. The other piece of that is then the national objectives from the president to make sure we can meet the national objectives as well.
Very good. Thank you for that. I think that'll be hugely, hugely helpful. I asked Admiral Richard earlier this year about China's ability to engage in limited nuclear employment and whether or not that was growing. He said that it was, and he was very emphatic on this point. And he talked about how important it is for the United States to maintain our own limited nuclear options if we're going to be able to deter China in what is our pacing theater. So let me just ask you, do you agree that we need to be concerned about China resorting to limited nuclear employment in a conflict, let's say, over Taiwan?
Senator, I think any near-peer nuclear adversary, we have to be concerned about that.
Would you agree that having our own limited nuclear options, whether that's low-yield SLBMs or nuclear-armed sea-launched cruise missiles, that having those, maintaining those, can help us deter China's limited nuclear use?
As I described to the committee, for me, it's about being able to give options to the commander-in-chief.
Very good. Are there other limited nuclear options that you think that we ought to be pursuing, whether that's in terms of additional capabilities, whether that's posture changes in order to deter Chinese and Russian limited nuclear use?
Senator, I think that goes along with that study that, if confirmed, taking that really deep study to understand what that outcome and because what I want is success at the end of that. So what that would look like. So if confirmed, that would be part of that study.
Okay, very good. Fair enough. Fair enough. You said to me yesterday, which I appreciated, I'm going to try to make sure I get you quoted correctly, and then we talk about it. If we can prevent China from crossing the Taiwan Strait, and they know that we've got a viable nuclear deterrent, then it's possible that Beijing might not escalate at all. And I thought that was right on the money. I agree with that 100%. And I just want to give you a chance to elaborate on that here, because it sounds to me like what you're saying is the right approach to deterring a Chinese invasion of Taiwan is denial, to deny them the ability to do that in the first instance, backed up by a very credible nuclear deterrent. So do I have that right? And would you elaborate on why you think that's the right combination?
Senator, I think that the whole reason that we have the strategic deterrence that we have today and the triad that we have today is to ensure that our adversaries understand that today shouldn't be the day for them. So as we were having that conversation, that's what I meant. I think that they would understand that if you have a credible nuclear deterrent, it would make them think twice before engaging with us. And
those two things, the conventional denial combined with the nuclear deterrent, those things have to sit together. Is that fair to say? I mean, they work hand in hand.
They work hand in hand. Conventional and nuclear works hand in hand.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, just on the question of our own nuclear modernization. Given the pace of China and Russia and their modernization, if confirmed, will you be looking for ways to accelerate our nuclear modernization and identify those options for Congress so that we can work together to make sure that we push the pace like we need to?
If confirmed, I would do that, Senator.
Very good. Let me just ask you one final thing here in my remaining seconds. The 2018 Nuclear Posture Review, it highlighted the importance of conventional nuclear integration, which we were just touching on, which of course is critical for strengthening conventional deterrence against adversaries who may use nuclear force for operational or coercive effects. Has the department, in your view, made sufficient progress on the conventional nuclear integration since the 2018 NPR?
I think it has, because in the past we didn't talk about it the way we should have. And I think the integration on being able to talk about going from conventional to nuclear, as opposed to doing a pause X, if you will, and then having that conversation, we've made leaps and bounds in that regard.
Very good. Thank you, General. Thanks again for the conversation yesterday. Thanks for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. Please.
Thank you. Congratulations again.